Tonight we're looking at an event, something absolutely huge. The day of the Lord is the biggest breakout of God's judgment on earth since Noah's flood. It will be not just an event, but a cataclysmic series of events, and it's all together referred to as the day of the Lord. It's called a day, but it makes it very clear, the Bible makes it clear that it's a period of time. It's that kind of day. And it's not something that's obscure. It's not tucked away in a few obscure passages in the Old Testament. It's spoken of loudly in the Old Testament and then spoken of again in the New Testament. We need to know about it tonight, and there's an awful lot to cover, so let's look at three main things tonight. What is the day of the Lord? That's the first thing we need to ascertain. What is it? When does it happen? And what should we do? We're going to look at this topically tonight, not just one passage. We'll look at, it's more of a survey tonight of different Bible passages. So let's go to our first main point. The day of the Lord is a period of God's judgment yet to occur. And on the screen is the third passage that Jem read to us tonight from 1 Thessalonians 5, 1-6. I'll just read the first part of that, where Paul says, concerning the times and seasons, brothers, you have no need to have anything written to you. So they were well informed already about what was happening. So I don't need to write to you about those things, he says. For you yourselves are fully aware, so they've been thoroughly briefed, you are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief, for you are all children of light, children of the day. We are not of the night or of the darkness. So we see here a couple of critical things. The day of the Lord involves destruction. Destruction. The day of the Lord comes upon people, just like the people in Sodom. The fire and brimstone just came upon them, and the day of the Lord is sudden. Paul says it will come upon the world like a thief, so people will be unsuspecting, and the day of the Lord suddenly arrives. Then if we go down, if you have your Bible open, down to verse 9, it's a day of wrath. God has not destined us Christians for wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. So the judgment of the day of the Lord, it's not like something going wrong with Mother Nature or climate change getting out of control or something that you can just describe scientifically or explain away that way. It's God's wrath coming upon humanity. And the wrath involves destruction. It is God dealing with sinful humanity. Now, it is not God judging every person on the planet, just as he did not do that at Noah's flood. He spared Noah and his family. 8 people were spared when the flood came. It's the same way here in verse 9. God has not destined us, Paul says, us who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. We're not destined for wrath. You've got nothing to worry about. But we obtain salvation. But the day of the Lord is for them. So let's just go to that next one. And notice, this is very important, friends, this stark contrast between them and you. Them and you. So he's talking to Christians, and he says, while people are saying there is peace and security, sudden destruction comes upon them, the unbelievers, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and those people will not escape. Then the contrast, but you believers at Thessalonica, you born-again ones, you saints, you are not in darkness. So they're in darkness, they're unsuspecting, but you're not in the darkness. So this should not surprise you like a thief. So this is very much about God dealing with sinful, unredeemed, unforgiven people on his planet. Now, I mentioned that the day of the Lord is not a 24-hour day, it's a period of time. Now, we even speak that way today. For example, someone will say, back in my grandfather's day, people worked 44 hours a week. And we wouldn't say to them, well, which day? Which day was that? Was it in February, or was it March, or was it Christmas Day? Well, what do you mean back in your grandfather's day? Well, they're talking about a period of time. Not a 24 hours day, just an era of time. And in the same way, the day of the Lord is not a 24-hour day. It's a segment of history. It is a period of time where God will intervene. Now, notice this next one, Isaiah chapter 13. You'll notice this isn't all going to happen in one 24-hour day. And this is one of the more shocking passages about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord comes, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pomp of the arrogant and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. So this is not all going to happen in one 24-hour day, just as Noah's flood was not just one 24-hour day. And it's clear when you get to the book of Revelation, there is a successive series of judgments, the bowls, the trumpets. This is not going to be compacted into a day. Now, very important, the day of the Lord is yet to happen. Some people might say, I don't believe that. I think it was all fulfilled in the Old Testament and, when the Babylonians destroyed Israel. It was all back then in the Old Testament. That's wrong. You know why it's wrong? Because Paul's writing to the Thessalonians in AD 51, and he says the day of the Lord is coming. It will come like a thief in the night. So you can't conveniently write it off and say this is all pre-Christ, the day of the Lord. That is not correct. And Peter, in his Pentecost sermon, portrayed the day of the Lord as future, quoting from Joel chapter 2. Now, you do have in the Bible what can be called a near and far fulfillment. And so when Joel said the day of the Lord is coming, there was a sense where it did come in Joel's day when the Babylonians came in. That was the near fulfillment, and the people of Judah did experience God's judgment at the hand of the Babylonians. So there was a near fulfillment, but then Joel says in the same chapter, the sun and the moon will grow dark and the stars diminish their brightness. And we read in Matthew 24 and Revelation 6 that those things happen. And they are future events. So the day of the Lord, yes, there are aspects where it was partially fulfilled in the Old Testament. And that foreshadowed the ultimate day of the Lord that Peter and Paul and Jesus look forward to in the New Testament. In fact, John Walford, who lectured for 5 decades on Bible prophecy, and we have one of his books in our library on Revelation, he said, prophecies sometimes have more than one fulfillment. This is referred to as the law of double reference. So it's not unusual that the day of the Lord would be partially fulfilled in the Old Testament, but still future. Now, what if someone says, well, okay, maybe the day of the Lord was fulfilled in AD 70. So Paul's saying in around AD 51 that the day of the Lord is coming. Well, maybe it all happened in AD 70 when Jerusalem was destroyed. A major problem with that view is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul says the day of the Lord will not come unless the rebellion comes first and the man of lawlessness has been revealed, who'll sit in God's temple proclaiming himself God. That has never been fulfilled. That did not happen in AD 70. So you cannot write off the day of the Lord as being fulfilled like preterists would do in AD 70, because where was the man of lawlessness? Where was a man sitting in God's temple proclaiming himself as God? That did not happen in the first century. So it is still a future event. Let's go to our next big point. The day of the Lord is spoken of using that exact term by 8 Old Testament writers, all of them prophets. They're listed there for you. All 8 of those Old Testament prophets used the phrase, the day of the Lord. Let's have a look at a few examples. Joel 2, the day of the Lord. In the day of the Lord, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood. Jesus spoke of that. Before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Amos 5, verse 20, you see it again. The day of the Lord, it's a time of darkness. Malachi 4, verse 5. This was after the Babylonian captivity and the Jews are back in their land. So he's still looking at the future here. I will send Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And then a longer reference, we'll just have a look. I won't read right through this, but from Zephaniah chapter 1, this is a longer, look at all the detail here about the day of the Lord. It's called the great day. Verse 15, it's a day of wrath. A day of wrath. It's a day of distress and anguish. People on earth are going to be deeply, deeply affected. Jesus spoke about people's hearts failing them for fear. Can you imagine that? People like having heart attacks. Was it your blocked arteries? No, I was afraid. but just so much fear gripping people that their hearts will fail them. And there's going to be a trumpet blast, verse 17. God says, I will bring, not just distress will happen, I will bring distress upon mankind because they've sinned. Verse 18, it's the day of the wrath of the Lord, and it's global. It's not just local, it's a global event in the earth. Next, the phrase, the day of the Lord, occurs 5 times in the New Testament, and I've listed them there for you. All of those references are referring to the day of the Lord. Number 4, the next one, the day of the Lord, as well as that phrase, the day of the Lord, it's also referred to in other Bible passages using other terms. For example, that day or the great day, referring about the same event. And Dwight Pentecost, in his book Things to Come, says that as well as that day of the Lord phrase, you've got these other phrases, and they occur more than 75 times in the Old Testament. Then in the New Testament, you get to Revelation 6, and we find out that there's a great day of God's wrath, referring to the same thing. Now, Peter, I'm not going to read all these tonight, but just highlight some of these things that Peter, he calls it the day of the Lord, but you'll notice a bit further down, he calls it the day of God. So just to say that there's a few other phrases and terms that mean the same thing. The day of God is coming, he says there. All right, next one. The day of the Lord, this is critical. The day of the Lord is a time of special intervention. Now, we are all often having earthquakes. Who could forget the 2004 tsunami that hit Southeast Asia and the shock? I remember being at home and just turning on the news, just the shock of that. We've had COVID, we've had famines, we've had different conflicts in the world. So there's always something going on in the world, whether it's nature or man fighting against man. But the day of the Lord just trumps it all. The day of the Lord is a time of special intervention where it's God intervening. So it's God's day. It is appropriately called the day of the Lord because the Lord is saying, it's time. It's time. I've let the Chinese government do what they wanted to do for a while. I let the Iranian regime do what they wanted to do for a while. I let different nations go their own. I'm letting North Korea do what they want to do for a while. And I've let the United States do what they want to do. And I've let people sin and live as they want. But now it's my turn. It is the day of the Lord where he will say that is enough and he will step in. Jesus said in Luke 13, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing? Behold, your house is forsaken. That's something God does. Your house is forsaken, and you will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So we see in Zechariah, the day of the Lord, the judgment comes, and there's a remarkable work of God among Israel, and a third are refined, and they will call out to Jesus. They will acknowledge that Jesus is the Lord. They'll go beyond seeing him as a historical figure. And then Luke 21, 20 to 24, again, we see that there would be vengeance against God's people. Now, these prophecies were firstly fulfilled in AD 70, but the point is that the day of the Lord just surpasses all of them. So AD 70 wasn't the day of the Lord. It was like a foreshadowing, but there's something coming that will be much, much bigger. Special intervention. It's not one city. So that's why, again, I would disagree with people who say that when Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, there it is, there's the day of the Lord. That was just one city. The day of the Lord is global. It's much bigger, as we see in Isaiah 13. Just a definition from the ESV Study Bible, it's helpful. The phrase day of the Lord refers to the great and terrible day when Yahweh will intervene to punish the disobedient. Again, it's not limited to Jerusalem. It's not limited to one nation. It's God punishing the disobedient, and we're not living that yet. We're not there yet. The day of the Lord is approaching, but we haven't reached that point yet. Let's go to Isaiah 13, and we referred to this earlier, but just a couple of things there. The day of the Lord comes, and you'll notice, look at verse 13. This is huge. I'm going to make the heavens tremble. Imagine that. The heavens trembling, and the earth will be shaken out of its place. That doesn't sound like an earthquake. To me, that sounds like an asteroid strike. That's not just an earthquake. That's the earth quaking. The planet quaking. The earth will be shaken out of its place. What would do that? That's huge. And at the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger. So this is God stretching out his hand in a way he hasn't done since Noah's flood and dealing with the world. The question is, there's some people would object and say, why would God be that angry? Why is there wrath? Aren't most people generally good? There's some bad eggs, but aren't most people in the world, most people in Australia generally good? And doesn't the Bible say that God is love? God is also a God of holiness and justice. His character demands that he deal with sin. And just think what man has been responsible for in the last 100 years. Just think what man has done. World War II, an estimated 50 million people killed, many of them civilians. World War II has been called the greatest bloodbath in history. It eclipsed everything that's ever happened in world history. Nothing compares to World War II. And then man was responsible for the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Sudanese War, the carnage in Colombia and Mexico with the drug trade, wars in Sri Lanka, Kashmir, Iraq, Bosnia, Somalia, Chechnya, the underreported war in Syria with tens of thousands of people killed, now conflicts in the Congo, Ukraine, and Gaza. Man introduced the nuclear age. He has been complicit in the breakdown of the family unit. He has aborted millions of unborn, defenseless babies. He's been responsible for the epidemic of pornography. He has preyed on children through the child prostitution industry. He is engaged in gross, immoral, and deviant behavior, including here in the Redlands, being guilty of corruption in high places. Is God relaxed about all this? Is God going to turn a blind eye to what man has done to God's earth? No way. He must punish the world. And those of you who grew up with brothers and sisters, how would you like an arrangement where you had a dad and every time your brother or sister did something wrong or cruel to you, he did nothing? Even if you ran and complained. Oh, my brother or sister just smashed my toys, just took this, just stole this, just pulled my hair. And he did nothing every time. How would you feel? Would not you want a father who intervened with a little bit of justice? Would you want God to be like a negligent, absent father? He will punish sin because his character demands it. He cannot be negligent. Think of what's happening in Queensland hospitals with late-term abortions. Is God going to wink at that? Oh, he's very angry. He's very angry at doctors and nurses and people complicit in the murder of unborn children in the womb. He will not turn a blind eye to this Holocaust in Queensland hospitals. But there's more. Not only will the day of the Lord be a time of wrath, there are people on earth who will identify it as such. Now, most people in the world, when something goes wrong, they want to blame Mother Nature or climate change or something else. But in Revelation chapter 6, John sees this tremendous judgment, a great earthquake, the sun turns black, the moon becomes like blood, stars fall from the heavens to the earth, which could be another way of John describing some kind of meteor shower. We don't know for sure, but stars falling from the heavens. And every mountain and island moved out of its place. That would lead me to think this ain't an earthquake. This is actually the earth quaking because of something hitting the earth. Every mountain and island moved out of its place. And what do you read next? In Revelation 6, at the end of the chapter, men will hide in the rocks and say, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand?" Isn't that amazing? Even unbelievers who aren't generally switched on to what God is doing in the universe, they will identify these tremendous acts as judgment from God. They won't be blaming Mother Nature then. Unregenerate people will recognize that. That's astonishing. And they will see that this is the wrath of the Lamb. They will identify Jesus as judging the world at that time. Friends, are we aware that we are living in pre-judgment days? Is that something you think about often in your life, that you are living in a season of history pre-judgment? And I mentioned this morning, we live between Noah's flood and the day of the Lord. But we're an awful lot closer to the day of the Lord than looking over our shoulder at Noah's flood. And so we live between these two great judgments, and it's impending. It could happen very, very soon. The clouds are gathering. The storm is brewing. God's wrath will strike this planet. So what should we do? Should we go home tonight and play Candy Crush Saga? Watch a comedy? What are we going to do in the light of this information? I want to suggest two things we should do. The first one is what Paul told the Thessalonians to do. Be sober. Don't entertain yourself to death. Be sober. Let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who drunk are drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober. And someone's written that song, we're children of the day. We're supposed to be alert and awake. So the first really application of the day of the Lord to our behavior is be sober, be alert, be switched on. Don't be engaged in a whole lot of trivia in life. Be aware that we're living prior to the day of the Lord. And secondly, and that will lead us to the second one, action. Action to pray for lost people. And if I can give you two I's tonight, intercessory prayer, intentional evangelism. Intercessory prayer for lost people, getting a list, writing a list of unsaved people we're going to pray for by name relentlessly and believe God to save them. And then intentional evangelism, not merely being available to witness to people who happen to come across our path, but intentional evangelism. Thinking on Monday morning, what am I going to do this week? God, what do you want me to do this week to intentionally reach lost people? And actually write it in the diary. Not just, I'll just breeze through the week and see what happens. Actually write something. I've started doing that. Write something in the diary that on this day at this time, I'm going to intentionally do this. That's over and above opportunities we do get, and some of you do get in the workplace. May God move us to be sober and to reach out. Let's go to our sixth point tonight. The day of the Lord will surpass in magnitude, intensity, and distress all other acts of judgment that have happened in history. I've alluded to that already, but look at what Jesus said. Look at what Joel said. The day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? It's unparalleled. It will surpass Noah's flood, the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem in AD 586, the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, the Black Plague, World War I, World War II, what's going on in the Middle East now. It will by far surpass all of those things. The 2004 tsunami, the day of the Lord will surpass in magnitude and distress all of those other events. Jeremiah talked about a day when all faces will turn pale. Jeremiah chapter 30. He says, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. Bowls and trumpets of wrath, such as the world has never seen. Now, another question I think is worth raising at this point. Why hasn't God judged the world already? When you think of all that man has done, the abortions, the world wars, the injustice, the cruelty, slave trade, all those things, why has God not judged the world yet? I mean, there certainly is a lot of sin. And those of you who've lived long enough in Australia, I'm sure would testify, we've never seen days like these. Australia in 2025 is much worse than in 1985. Some of you remember way back further than that. You've never seen days like these. Well, people don't even know what gender they are. And just craziness going on called normality. Why hasn't God judged the world yet? That's because his program right now is an ingathering. God is gracious. Just as he gave people before Noah's flood time, he gave them time before the flood came. And he's giving people time. And we're in the age of the ingathering, where Jesus is building his church. These are pre-judgment days. These are ingathering days. And so that's why it hasn't come yet. He's not willing that any should perish. He's giving people an opportunity. But just as before Noah built the ark, and that was pre-judgment time, those days didn't go on, did they, for hundreds and hundreds of years. The time came when, as Jesus said, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. That's long-term planning. Until the day Noah entered the ark, and then Jesus said this, the flood took them all away. The flood took them all away. Unsuspecting people. God closed the door of the ark, broke up the fountains of the deep, deluged the world, and mankind, except 8 people, was destroyed. So in the same way, we are like Noah just before the flood. And there's an opportunity for people to repent. But the time will come when the door will close. And if you don't know Jesus Christ tonight, this is the time. This is the time. In these pre-judgment days, this is your opportunity to come to God and say, Lord, I acknowledge I've sinned against you, but I believe that your Son, Jesus Christ, died on the cross for sinners. And I'm reaching out to him, and I'm trusting him. Jesus, please save me. I confess my sins. I believe you took my sin upon you on the cross. I believe you rose from the dead. And this is your opportunity to escape wrath by reaching for the Lord Jesus Christ, and he will save you. He's merciful. The judgment could start, friends, very soon. None of us can say when it will be, but we can say it could be sooner than we think. It could be sooner than we think. The day of the Lord, number 7, involves cosmic and seismic disturbances. I've mentioned this briefly, but you've got the heavens and the earth shaking. You've got Jesus saying the sun will be dark and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven. Imagine that. Stars falling from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Joel 2, the heavens tremble. Revelation 6, you've got stars falling to the earth. These aren't ordinary calamities, friends. That involves these massive cosmic disturbances that are unmissable. I mean, the way that we are now, we can be living on one side of the earth, and there could be a tsunami or an earthquake while we're sleeping tonight in the northern hemisphere. We wouldn't even know. But these are much bigger things that happen in the day of the Lord. Number 8, the day of the Lord involves military activity and God's judgment in Israel. So while God judges the world, you find these Bible passages that locate judgment and action upon people in Israel, people who come against Israel being judged. This is not to say nothing happens anywhere else, it does, but you've got these events in Israel. Let's have a look. I won't read through them all, but you'll notice in Zechariah chapter 12, he gives an oracle concerning Israel, and God says, this is big. This is big, verse 2. I am about to make Jerusalem, not Athens, not New York, not Rome, not Sydney. There's such a big emphasis in the Bible on Jerusalem. I'll make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day, I'll make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. We've seen precursors to this. When Israel became a nation again in May 14, 1948, 5 Arab nations attacked and lost. Then 1967, they had another go and lost. 1973, the Yom Kippur War, they lost again. Hezbollah have lost. Hamas will lose. Everyone who comes against Israel. No, it doesn't make Israel perfect. Doesn't mean their government are believers. Most of them are unbelievers. But God is preserving that nation because he has a future. And it doesn't matter who comes against them, they will not prevail. Because God said to Abraham, those who dishonor you, I'll curse. So you cannot fight against Israel and win. So Hamas and these other groups, they are dead certain losers. You wouldn't want to bet on them because they are dead certain losers. You cannot fight against Israel and win. Hitler tried it and lost. Then in Zechariah, we'll just go to the next one. Zechariah, I'm going to protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And look, I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. If you think it's bad now, imagine if it was 50 or 100 nations ganging up on that tiny little country, which could happen because he says all the nations. And then Zechariah 14 is astonishing again. He says, I will gather all the nations. Imagine that. I mean, how many nations is that going to be? I'm going to gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. The Lord will go out and fight against those nations, as when he fights on the day of battle. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. That's Jesus Christ coming back and standing not on Mount Fuji, not on Mount Kosciuszko, not on any other mountain in the world. There's a big focus in the Bible on Israel in the last days. He'll stand on the Mount of Olives. Those prophecies I've referred to there have never been fulfilled. When have all nations gathered against Jerusalem? When has Jesus come back and stood on the Mount of Olives? So you can't say this was all fulfilled in AD 70 or any other time in history. All right, so let's go to our conclusion tonight. How does the day of the Lord affect you? What's your response tonight? How does hearing about the day of the Lord affect you? And those of you watching tonight on your phones or TVs at home, how does hearing about the day of the Lord affect you? Because it sure is meant to affect us. We're not meant to just walk out of here tonight and just brush this off and get back to normal life. See, it's meant to cause a response. And as I mentioned before, the first response, there ought to be a soberness about us. And I believe in laughing. Do you? You got a sense of humor? It's okay to laugh. It's good to laugh. But not all the time. There should also be a soberness about the people of God, that life isn't trivial. We're not meant to be laughing around the clock. Paul had great sorrow in his heart over unbelieving Israel. So these two can coexist, the joy of the Lord and a sorrow over lost people at the same time. There should be a soberness about us. And we shouldn't be cruising along as if society as we know it here in the Redlands is going to continue as it is. You know, having this mindset, for the next 30 years, I just know it, I'm still going to be shopping at Coles and Woolies, and we're still all going to be driving around in cars, and we're still going to have plenty of food to eat, and we'll still go to graduation ceremonies for our kids when they get to grade 12. We'll still have a movie night at home once a week. We'll still have picnics in the park. Oh, life's just going to continue in the Redlands the next 30 years, as it always has. How do you know? How do you know that? No one can guarantee such a thing. Why would we think that everything is going to continue as it is when the day of the Lord is coming and none of us know when? So we need to be on an end times footing, always ready, always sober, and ready for a ramping up of hostility against followers of Jesus. And I know some of you in our church have already testified of things getting a little bit trickier in the workplace now, with some of the demands, some of the requirements with training and so on, because of the way the world is going, with a deviant morality. And we can expect increased hostility and persecution. I don't know if you've seen, I know Aaron's seen it, the God's Not Dead. I think it's part 3. Part 3. It's quite a good movie where it reaches the point. Obviously, it's just a fictitious story, but it puts forward for scenarios that I think are not unrealistic. And one scenario they put forward in the third movie is pastors having to submit their sermons before they preach them to the powers that be in government. And that's not far-fetched. When you see some of the things, the way that the Chinese government monitors the 3 self-patriotic churches and some of the things going on in the world today, it's not past them. It's not past someone to be watching tonight, taking notes and then reporting to someone. So, these things aren't far-fetched. Persecution will surely ramp up. We need to be ready for that, not coasting along as if it's always going to be peacetime. And secondly, let's take action in evangelism. Intercessory prayer, intentional evangelism. The perishing aren't alarmed about the coming day of the Lord, are they? Because they don't know it's coming. Do you have someone grabbing you by the arm as you walk through a shopping centre saying, please, how do I escape the day of the Lord? Have you ever had that experience? They are not alarmed because they don't know it's coming. So we need to be alarmed on their behalf. They're not praying for their soul. We need to be praying for their soul on their behalf. That's the intercessory prayer. It's very much the lost sinner is here. They are perishing. They're heading towards destruction. And there's a holy God looking on the God who will judge. And we come in the middle, like Samuel. We come in the middle and we represent that person to God in prayer. And we say, Lord, please have mercy on that lost person. Please give them a little bit more time to respond to the gospel. And we become concerned on their behalf. They're not concerned, so we become concerned for them. That's the role of the intercessor. And I'll tell you something, that's a real selfless ministry. There's really nothing for us to gain. It's just completely unselfish that we would give up time and effort in order to reach someone who's unconcerned about what's coming up. Would you be that unselfish? Would I? To step up to intercessory prayer and intentional action. And I'll finish with this. Charles Spurgeon said, if you want to win souls for Christ, feel a solemn alarm about them. Believe their danger. Believe their helplessness. Believe that only Christ can save them. And talk to them as if you meant it. The Holy Spirit will move them by first moving you. If you can rest without their being saved, they will rest too. So it's time for us, friends, to evaluate, be sober, and reach out to lost and perishing sinners while there's still time, because God's day is coming.